Hey Star Trek fans, Dan Gunther here. Welcome to another review of a Lower Decks episode. This video features my thoughts on Season 4, Episode 3, in the Cradle of Vexilon. So first thing about this episode, it starts out without a teaser and drops us right into the opening credits, followed by Act 1. And this is interesting because over the last couple of episodes, we've gotten kind of this recurring thing of this mysterious alien vessel attacking starships. We had Klingons in the first episode, Romulans in the second. We don't get a continuation of that here, but I'm assuming this is a thread that will be picked up again in future episodes. For this episode, though, we have the Cerritos visiting Coruscant, an alien megastructure, kind of like a Dyson's ring almost, that is under the control of a computer, and the computer seems to be malfunctioning, and in a surprising turn of events, it's not that the computer is enslaving the people or becoming megalomaniacal or anything like that. This is actually a friendly computer and one that the inhabitants of Coruscant maintain this close relationship with and have relied upon for uncounted years. I really liked that aspect of the story. I liked that we don't do the cliche of the, computer that's going to enslave the population that we've seen so many times in Star Trek and other science fiction, of course. But I do like that the characters keep worrying that that's about to happen. Oh, he's not going to turn evil, is he? Oh, no, he's fine. And it never turns out to be that way. There's issues with the computer, there's problems going on, but it's merely a hardware or software technical issue, right? It's not that this thing is going to take over and kill everyone, or at least not intentionally. We learn that Captain Freeman minored in archaic computing at the Academy, which means that she wants to get hands-on with this and isn't going to rely on her engineers, which maybe spells kind of short-term disaster for these people. But it eventually, of course, works out because it's a Star Trek episode. It's going to work out in the end. But, kind of her getting her hands dirty and kind of digging into the guts of this computer maybe wasn't the best idea, as she basically initiates a software update that the computer's overdue for, but maybe had to shut it down before doing the update, and that leads to some issues here. We learn that the computer was last updated 6,000,007 years ago, which I thought was funny and kind of triggered a little memory for me, and I'm wondering if this was a deliberate reference. There was a joke going around that I loved where this person is taking a tour of the museum and asks how old the dinosaur bones are of this T-Rex or whatever, and the curator or the tour guide says they're 6,000,007 years old. And they say, well, how do you know that so exactly? Well, when I started here, I was told they were 6 million years old, and I've been here for 7 years. So I don't know if this is a reference to that joke, but I don't know if those are the exact numbers, but it really reminded me of that. So I wonder if somebody had read that. I just love it. So specific. 6,000,007 years ago, it was last updated. So the bulk of the episode is kind of dealing with the fallout of this and trying to reboot the computer and restart it. There's a point where the computer is kind of regenesising the megastructure and going to restart everything. And they have to stop that before that happens. And a big part of this is Brad Boimler leading his first away mission as a lieutenant junior grade. And I really enjoy this story. Those of you who have watched these know that my favorite thing in Lower Decks is the character work. And as frustrating as it is to watch Boimler kind of not be able to trust the ensigns under his command, I love the journey that he's on and the role that T'Lyn plays in kind of prodding him and helping him to become a better leader to the ensigns in the away team. That whole story was a lot of fun, and of course with Brad dying his first death apparently at the end of this episode, but coming back thanks to the ministrations of T'Ana, possibly. He doesn't stay dead for long, and I think it was Jack Ransom who said, you never forget your first death. So, more to come for Boimler as he climbs the ranks, dying and coming back, as is so often the case with Starfleet officers. Little jokes in the background that I love about this. At one point, the clouds in the sky freeze, they become solid ice and fall to the ground. This society is kind of made up of artists and people of leisure because the computer takes care of all of their needs. and everyone's kind of screaming and running away, and this person was painting the landscape and the cloud crashes down and they're kind of startled. Then they smile, look at the cloud, and keep painting. I thought that was kind of funny. Meanwhile, the secondary story of the episode sees the new lieutenants, minus Boimler and T'Lyn, who of course are on the, not the planet, but the megastructure, sees them being hazed, or seemingly being hazed, by a lieutenant. They're kind of celebrating the fact that they don't have to do the menial work anymore because they're no longer ensigns, and yet they get assigned to scan every isolinear chip in this one room that's full of banks of isolinear chips to find one faulty one. And they kind of come to the conclusion that they're being hazed, which at various points in the episode seems to be the case, and then maybe not the case. And then by the end, we find out, yes, they are in fact getting hazed. I enjoyed this. It was more of kind of the wacky adventure type story. I did enjoy it for kind of the references to past Star Trek, which I will get into in the Easter egg section. But there's some fun stuff there that kind of pokes fun at some much maligned stuff in Star Trek's past. We also learn that Billups keeps a pet ferret named Lancelot aboard the ship, which is cute. And we also learn about Tellarite slop jazz, which is apparently a genre of music that has some fans aboard the Cerritos, and Mariner may be turning into a fan of Tellarite slop jazz, which she's kind of not impressed by. So all in all, a strong episode. I very much enjoyed this. I also like this kind of continuing trend of building more of a lower decks mythology rather than simply relying on Star Trek mythology. And like I said, I'll get to the Easter eggs in a moment. So they do kind of dip into Star Trek mythology quite a bit. But, you know, with this new planet or new mega structure, Coruscant, Lower Decks is kind of building its own set of references and new things added to the Star Trek universe, rather than simply always relying on things and places we've seen before. So I do appreciate that very much. So Easter eggs in this episode, there were definitely a few. The reactors that Boimler and his team are working on Coruscant look very much like the Warp 5 warp reactors aboard NX-class starships in Star Trek Enterprise. I thought at first they kind of look vaguely like it, and then we see this shot of the fronts of them, and yeah, they are definitely modeled on Enterprise's Warp 5 engine. We also get a visit to the anomaly storage room in this episode, which means there are lots of little Easter eggs here. So we have a Lurpa, the Vulcan weapon. We have Nomad, the space probe that threatened the Enterprise in the original series episode The Changeling. We have the Chula board game, a much smaller version of the game. This is the one featured in the Deep Space Nine first season episode Move Along Home. And this will feature more into the plot here, where they're going to trap the lieutenant in the game, but then he feeds them a story that he has, you know, PTSD because he got trapped in one of those games for a month, and in their attempt to take it down, Rutherford gets stuck in the game and has to solve it really quickly. That was fun. A lot of people really dislike that episode, Move Along Home. It's a guilty pleasure for me because I saw it when I was so young, and it made an impression on me. So I really appreciate that episode, and even the Ala Moraine scene, which gets riffed on here. As ridiculous as it is, I really enjoy it. We also have Ambassador Kolos's box and a visor. This was the box that the Medusan ambassador stayed in the TOS episode, Is There in Truth No Beauty? Medusans, of course, no stranger to modern Star Trek. We have a Medusan character in Star Trek Prodigy Zero. There's also a Klingon Batleth, a Betazoid gift box, similar to the one seen in TNG Season 1 episode Haven. In that episode, the gift box was played by Armin Shimmerman, who would later go on to play a number of Ferengi, most notably Quark in Deep Space Nine. There's also a 23rd century Romulan cloaking device. This is similar to the device, or maybe even the same device, that Kirk stole from a Romulan ship in the episode The Enterprise Incident. And this isn't a reference to something in previous Star Trek, but I just had to point this out. I love this. There's the hat that turned Billups into a church tower. Again, Lower Decks building its own lore. I love it. We have the mention of a musician who performs Tellarite slop jazz who apparently overdosed on Ketracel White. Ketracel White, of course, was the narcotic that the founders used to keep the Jem'Hadar in line. We have a miniature version of the Inner Light probe, or perhaps the inner workings of the Inner Light probe, that would cause someone to live an entire imagined life, a simulated life like Picard did in the TNG episode, The Inner Light. In this case, the Betazoid gift box gets the kind of brunt of it and lives an entire life and has a family. I'm really glad Rutherford didn't get hit with that. That will mess you up, I am assuming. I kind of feel bad for the box. Hopefully they are correct and that it is not actually sentient. While looking at the ancient computer, Billups asks, is it a Unitronic? And says that that joke would kill in engineering. The computer systems of Federation starships, according to the TOS episode, The Ultimate Computer, are duotronic. So unitronic would be an earlier version of that. So very old. And I'm sure absolutely that joke would kill to an engineer. Very funny. Very funny, Andy. Good job. And finally, when Boimler dies at the end of this episode, he sees the Black Mountain and a koala, both of which have featured in kind of afterlife type scenarios or coming back to life scenarios in previous episodes of Lower Decks. Again, like I said, just kind of building their own lore a little bit and relying on that more than past Star Trek. I really do appreciate that. Well, those were my thoughts on the episode in the Cradle of Vexilon. What did you think of this episode? Let me know in the comments below. Were there any Easter eggs that I missed? I'd like to know that as well. Please leave a comment. Thank you all so very much for watching, and thanks of course to the Patreon supporters for all of your help in bringing these episodes to you. I could not do it without you. Thank you so very much. To everyone else, as I said, thank you for watching. I will see you all in the next episode, which is titled Something Borrowed, Something Green. So until then, live long and prosper.